Welcome to Ag PhD. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for joining us today. On the show today, we're going to talk a little about sorghum. What can you do for weed control? This is not a topic we usually cover on the show, so we thought we'd get to this crop because it's on a lot more acres this year than normal.
Well, one other thing that's happening a lot across the country this year is tank mixing. It's not just one thing with another thing. It's about 3 or 4 things in many cases. We're going to talk about some of the concerns you should have before you mix multiple products together.
As always, we've got a Weed of the Week coming up later in the show, as well as Iron Talk. But first, here's this week's Farm Basics.
Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
During our Farm Basics time today, we're going to answer one of the most popular questions we get from non-farmers. How big is an acre? And not only that, how quickly can a farmer now farm an entire acre?
Well, it's certainly different with mechanized agriculture versus walking out there and hand seeding each individual plant. But when we look at an acre, what that represents is 43,560 square feet. So you may look at your yard and say, well, I've got a 100-foot by 100-foot lot. Well, 100 by 100, that's 10,000 square feet. That's about a quarter of an acre. So an acre is a pretty good sized unit, and that's what in the United States is used as a unit of measure for farmers when they look at field to field. Oh, this is 40 acres, 60 acres, 80 acres, and many of the seed purchases that farmers make are by the acre, or crop protection purchases they make are also by the acre.
So to put this in pretty simple terms that most people can understand, the size of an acre is about the size of a football field without the end zones, and maybe just a little bit smaller. So roughly it's 145 feet wide instead of 160 that a football field is. So if you're 300 feet long and 145 feet wide, that's about roughly what an acre is. So yeah, if you're looking at football this fall and you say, okay, there's a football field, that's roughly what an acre is.
All right, so when you think about that, for farmers, they're trying to farm their acres and get jobs done. So when it comes to planting, farmers want to get it done as quickly as they can because they're trying to plant on the optimal date. When the soil is warm enough, the weather is warm, and we get far enough along in the calendar, they aren't concerned about a frost, or they're concerned about the harvest and how many days does that crop need to get done so I can harvest it by a certain date. So for farmers, they want to get stuff done fast. So how fast can a farmer farm an acre?
Okay, so to run this math, it's really pretty simple. You've got your 43,560 square feet, and let's say we're doing some application that is 40 feet wide. Okay, so 40 into 43,560, roughly you're talking 1,000. So we've got to cover 1,000 feet. Okay, well the thing is, a mile is 5,000 feet, so that's 1/5 of a mile. Well, if you figure that a farmer can go 5 miles per hour, you can cover a lot of acres in an hour. So 5 times 5 roughly, you could cover 25 acres in an hour without all that much problem. And it just depends on the operation you're doing. So quite commonly in the fall, when we think about harvest on our own farm, by the time you figure the end rows and a little bit of messing around, unloading, all this kind of stuff, we figure we're going to do with one combine 10 or 15 acres an hour, and planting we're going to do 20 acres, 25 acres an hour, something like that. The big thing is we're not just planting, we're not just harvesting. There's a lot of time turning around, unloading, filling, all those types of things. So that kind of slows the process down. But there are a lot of things on the farm, spraying, fertilizing. We could do 100 acres an hour without all that much difficulty if we were really rolling.
So when you travel around the world, we talk about acres here on United States farms, but in other areas of the world, they talk about hectares. And what a hectare is roughly 2.5 acres. So it's a bigger unit of measure than what we're using here in the United States. And maybe that's just the changing times a little bit too, Brian. I realize it's the metric system versus the old system that we use. But when you think about it, for farmers, yeah, they can get an acre done so fast. Maybe we should be going by hectares and go by bigger units.
Well, yeah, I just look at, okay, 100 years ago, how much could a farmer really farm? Not much. I mean, that's why a lot of people are only doing maybe 100 acres, 200 acres, and it was a pretty good sized farm. And you had to put in a lot of hours to get that done. Well, anymore, a farmer can handle a couple thousand acres almost by himself. It's just there's a lot of grain to haul away and things like that. But in terms of the planting, the tillage, the spraying, all those kind of things, pretty easy to cover a lot of acres in a short amount of time. And the good thing, here's the best news about this all. When a farmer can do more things in a day, then that allows him to pick his days. In other words, he doesn't have to go out there spraying in bad conditions. He doesn't have to do excess tillage in some cases, or tilling at the wrong time when it's super windy, or when he's got real muddy conditions so he damages the land. He can do the right thing for the land, and that's the great thing about all this nice equipment that we've got anymore that allows us to cover all the acres in a short time.
Well, and certainly for farmers, they want to get fields with more acres. It's a lot easier to farm big chunks of ground than it is to farm 1 acre at a time and then have to drive 2 miles over and then farm another acre and so forth. So there are a lot of things that go into this, but for farmers, when you talk to them about anything they're doing with their land, almost always the farmer will say, well, I'm dealing with 1 acre at a time.
And one of the most important things to scout on that acre is our weed of the week. This could be one of the toughest weeds in soybeans, believe it or not. We'll tell you how to control it on your farm coming up later in the show.
Regalia RX biofungicide activates a plant's natural defense system, limiting the effects of disease and improving overall plant health. Regalia RX complements your fungicide program to optimize yield and strengthen return on investment. Ask your retailer for Regalia RX today.
With the success of the Case IH Steiger Quad Track and Magnum Road Track tractors, it's no secret why Case IH is the leader of the track. So it wasn't surprising when the competition started imitating us. But only Case IH offers a 5-axle design to give you a smoother ride, more power to the ground, with less berming and compaction. Still, we're flattered. In fact, if we weren't already red, we'd be blushing.
Dirty work pays. That is if your dirty work includes a SoilMax Gold Digger tile plow. SoilMax tile plows feature zero deflection technology. With the only tile plow factory paired with Ag Leader's IntelliSlope control system, you eliminate the need for grade calculations and lasers. So make your next investment in a SoilMax Gold Digger. Better yield, longer planting and harvest windows, better water management is all yours with SoilMax. Visit soilmax.com.
A farmer's attention to detail is what makes the difference. You take the time for service management because you know how vital it is to your operation. You service your field like everything else because soil sampling makes all the difference and gets the results you want. Download the app Soil Test Pro and start grid sampling today. Keep your farm growing strong. The more you test, the more you know.
This year's projected U.S. soybean yield will lose over $500 million per point in shrink. Eliminate shrink in your bin. Store grain without lowering moisture content with the AgriDry Bullseye Temperature and Moisture Controller. The Bullseye monitors air temperature and relative humidity, allowing your fans to utilize the weather's natural condition to maintain your grain at market moisture. Fan runtimes drastically decrease along with the cost of over-drying. Eliminate shrink today. Call now.
Your time is valuable. That's why you need a Hagie STS application system. Hagie STS products are designed for precision and efficiency, allowing you to make applications all season long with just one machine. Contact your Hagie rep today.
How do you stop weeds in sorghum? Here's the best news of the day. There are so many more options than there used to be. I just remember growing up and we talked to sorghum producers and they'd say, well, I have to treat my seed and then I can use dual, and otherwise I can spray 2,4-D, Banville, atrazine. That's all I've got. I don't have a lot of choices. Today, there are more choices, but those products that we used 30 years ago are actually still in play today, and in a lot of cases, they're tremendously effective.
Sorghum and corn aren't tremendously dissimilar, so a lot of the same options that you could use in corn, you may be able to use in sorghum. One of the challenges, though, thinking back to pre-Roundup Ready corn days was grass control. If we didn't do a great job pre, we really had a tough time post-emerge trying to get it under control, and it was expensive as well. So for me, it all starts with a good foundation program. You've got to get that seed concept treated. That gives you the option of using something like Dual or Outlook pre-emerge, where you can use a good strong rate of those products, try and take care of most of your annual grasses, especially the foxtail species. You wipe them out and some of the small seeded broadleaves, and post-emerge then, hopefully, we're just looking at controlling broadleaves because we do have a lot of broadleaf options.
Here's the thing though, coming back to the grass, because that is the #1 issue in sorghum. A lot of people will say, well, I'm in a dry area. I can't afford to put a full rate of a pre-emerge herbicide on. Look, this is the one thing that our dad told us growing up. He was a farmer in Iowa and he moved to South Dakota farming with significantly less rainfall. And he said, here's the thing, boys. When I was in Iowa, I learned that rain corrected my mistakes. The less rain that I have, the fewer mistakes I can make. And if you have any grass coming up, that's an enormous mistake. We just can't have grass at all in corn, in sorghum, in wheat, in any of those grass crops. It robs so much yield so quickly. That's devastating. So our #1 piece of advice to you, and I know it's hard to invest $5 extra, but you gotta do it in the case of sorghum or corn. Put that money out, get the grass under control right up front. And yes, we've got Paramount as a post-emerge option now, and that's fine, but Paramount costs a fair amount of money. I'd rather spend $5 more pre than have to come with a much more expensive option post. So please put a full rate of a grass killer out pre. You'll be happy that you did.
Well, the other thing, not only does that grass rob yield, it takes up nutrients and it takes up a lot of moisture. And if you're in a situation where you don't have enough moisture, the way I look at it is you barely have enough moisture for your sorghum. Right. You don't have any extra moisture to give to weeds. And you can say, well, I'll fry those weeds off later. Yes, but they took that moisture up and it's gone. So don't let that happen to you. You got to conserve moisture. Now, when it comes to broadleaves, we've got a lot of different options, and there are some that have a little bit of residual control. There's some that are strictly contact activity, and it depends on what you're going to rotate to. You could pick something like bucktrol, for example, if the weed spectrum's right for you. Let's say you have cockleburs, sunflowers, lamb's quarters, those kinds of weeds. Bucktrol can do a nice job for you.
Yeah, but what else are you going to do other than no residual products? You've got Banville, you've got bucktrol, and that's about it. The new option that you do have that gives you some residual is Husky. And Husky is a combination of bucktrol and another product in HPPD that's similar to Callisto. So in the past, Callisto has been labeled, like in Lumax, for example, pre-emerge, and you can still use Callisto today pre-emerge. So if you want to do that pre, you can. And in many cases, I would say, hey, maybe consider throwing a little bit of Callisto out pre, then you could just come back with bucktrol or Banville post-emerge. But anyway, now we do have that Husky option. So to Darren's point, yeah, I mean, you've still got the old choices out there. You can go bucktrol or Banville, throw in some atrazine, that'll work pretty well for you, but you got to be a little bit careful with the atrazine and then that new option Husky if you're going to rotate to certain crops.
All right, the point today that we're making is there are a lot of different options for weed control in sorghum. So don't just say, well, I've grown sorghum for the last 20 years, here's what I use. No, take a look, because there are a number of products that have gotten labeled over the last few years now that weren't before, and they're really good options. They're improvements over some of the things that we had. Sure, the old standbys of using something like Dual for pre and using something like a dicamba or a bucktrol, they're good options still, but there are a number of different products that can supplement your program and help you make more money and more yield.
Well, one of the weeds that you're not going to be able to control very easily in your sorghum crop is our Weed of the Week. We'll tell you what you can use on your farm coming up later in the show.
Working in agriculture over the past 3 decades, I saw a need for an accurate way to apply dry product to seed. That's where our Changing Times applicators come in. The CT applicator brush sifts powder into small particles, resulting in proper distribution. Quantities can be adjusted by the speed of the brush rotation. This allows for even and accurate distribution of product. Application at the time of planting can be used with any seed delivery system and saves farmers time, labor, and money. Remember, CT applicators for the changing times.
For lower cost, higher production, Mandaco Agri leads with versatility unmatched. Twister is the vertical tillage unit for no-till as well as conventional tillage. Twister's ease of maintenance is forgiving and rocks and has contour conformity equaling 0 downtime. Our hydraulically adjusted coulter angles make residue management easier, less costly. Spring or fall, the Mandaco Twister vertical tillage unit is the new leader. See your Mandaco Agri dealer. Visit northcountrymarketing.biz or call.
I wish I could side dress more than just nitrogen.
You can. While side dressing is efficient for nitrogen applications, you can also use that opportunity to apply PK and the micronutrients your crop needs. AgroLiquid's Calibrate and MicroLink products allow you to nutritionally balance your side dress application efficiently and economically. Let agricultural liquid fertilizer help you make your next crop a bumper crop. For more info, visit agroliquid.com.
If you could see how nitrogen loss causes yield loss, you'd fix it. So fix it right, with the stabilizer proven to reduce all 3 ways nitrogen escapes. Nutrisphere N Nitrogen Fertilizer Manager. It keeps nitrogen in a more readily available form longer. With today's market and environment, it's a high priority to keep your nitrogen on track. To higher yield with Nutrisphere N.
It's a humble idea. Use a biological process to turn a plant into a power source. From that idea came the first POET refinery. One biorefinery in one town turned into 27 facilities in 27 towns, creating new local jobs, producing hundreds of millions of gallons of ethanol, and providing renewable products around the world. Suddenly, that one little idea seems a whole lot bigger. See the world differently with POET.
One of the most popular questions, unfortunately, that we get every summer is, hey, how do I solve this tank mixing issue? I'm putting 2 or 3 or 4 things together and I've got this problem going on, and you name the problem. It might be antagonism. The stuff didn't mix very well, so now it's kind of a gel or a paste. We've got problems plugging spray tips, plugging screens, all kinds of issues. We want to talk today about some of the most common answers to these problems.
I like the other way the question gets asked. Hey, what do you think about a mix of this, 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 and this? And you know, I just think back to my early days as an agronomist and going to some of the South Dakota State University functions. The extension weed specialist at that time, Leon Reggie, would say, you know, sometimes 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 = 0, or worse yet, you wish you wouldn't have done it. So you do have to kind of ask an agronomist whenever you're going to mix lots of things. Yes, one of the big things you have to ask is, can I even mix these things? Will they even work in the tank? This is where a jar test is so critical. I was just talking to an agronomist this morning about this. Hey, what do you think about this 3-way mix? Have you ever seen it done? And his response was, do you mean from a weed control standpoint, or can I get it to mix together in the tank? And that's really my first thing is, will it even mix in the tank? If it's gonna turn into Jell-O, or if it's gonna turn into cottage cheese in the tank, I don't want anything to do with that, regardless of what I need to do for weed control. I may need multiple passes.
Okay, we don't want to scare you. Here are the 2 key things though. Number 1, you gotta do it in the right order. And number 2, you want to always have compatibility agent on your spray truck. So let's start first with this compatibility thing. There are 2 different types of compatibility agents, and the 2 main categories we're talking about are the compatibility agents that solve your problem before you have the issue, and the ones that cost a little more money usually, but help solve your problem after you've already got that problem that's sitting in the tank. So as a preliminary thing, a lot of times people will tell you, hey, anytime you're going to throw liquid fertilizer together with a herbicide, it's a good idea to throw a little bit of that cheaper compatibility agent, you know, the stuff that works before you have the problem. Throw a little bit of that in every time. Now, we don't do that on our farm, but there are some people who recommend that. So anyway, have these 2 different types of compatibility agents on your farm. That's going to most likely help you a lot, especially when you get yourself into trouble. Then let's talk about the mixing order. What I always tell people is, put the thing in water first that's furthest from water. In other words, the thing that appears most difficult to mix. The dry flowables, the soluble packets, that kind of stuff. Then finally you want to throw in thick liquids, and the very last thing is thin liquids. And if you've got 2 things that are really hard to mix, let's say I've got ammonium sulfate and I've got Valor. I got 2 dry flowables. You know what I suggest? Take the one that's the smallest quantity. So with the ammonium sulfate, I might be throwing in lots of bags there. I might only be throwing in a few ounces of Valor. Well, I want to mix the thing I'm putting in a few ounces of. I'll mix that in a 5-gallon pail with water first. So I pre-slurry it and then I dump it in.
All right, now anytime you're mixing multiple products together, I'm thinking about the unintended consequences. For example, let's say that you're mixing in a strobilurin fungicide with some different herbicides. A lot of times that strobilurin can actually heat up some of the herbicides that you're putting it with. So make sure you're talking to your agronomist about, hey, you know what, I'm concerned about leaf response. Will I see more when I mix something in? Now the other thing is you may see a decrease in control sometimes. Many times if you're mixing a post-emerge broadleaf killer with a post-emerge grass killer, you do see a slight decrease in grass control. Now that's not a big deal if you only have a few grasses out there, or it's an easy species for that weed control product to control. But let's say it's something really tough. Let's say it's field sandbur. You may be better off making 2 passes across that field to get maximum weed control.
Okay, so there are a lot of things to consider. I guess the big thing is we want you to have compatibility agent along, mix your stuff in the right order, and make sure you're talking to an agronomist. And another thing you want to talk to an agronomist about is our Weed of the Week. Can you identify this week's weed?
The Weed of the Week is sponsored by the Enlist Weed Control System from Dow AgroSciences, a new herbicide and trait system that will build on glyphosate.
Farming isn't just in the land, it's in you. Take control of weeds like never before. Enlist builds on the Roundup Ready system, combining proven control of a new 2,4-D and glyphosate in Enlist Duo herbicide. Protect what matters without changing the way you farm. Talk to your seed or crop protection supplier today.
Weed for weed, volunteer Roundup Ready corn is actually the worst weed you could possibly get in soybeans. And I know you might say, oh, it's Palmer pigweed, it's kochia, whatever. But what I'm talking about here is if I just had 1 Palmer pigweed, I had 1 velvet leaf, I have 1 lamb's quarters, 1 kochia, 1 volunteer corn plant, that volunteer corn plant robs the most yield.
All right, so let's get it under control. In soybeans, we have lots of options. We have a whole bunch of different grass killers post-emerge that can be used. Things like Select Max,
stop. No,
Assure,
let's not throw them out. Let's go in order. The very best thing is Fusilade. The next thing is Assure 2, Secure, that family. And then the worst thing is the Select Max, that family. And they work actually quite well. It's just if we're talking 99% control and I need that versus 97% or 96%, well, I mean, that might make a difference to you.
It's still an A, Brian. It's still an A.
I'm just saying. And let's say that we have tougher conditions. Let's say we have drought conditions and the corn's getting taller and I got some of these factors going against me. I'm tank mixing it with 2 other things. All of a sudden, I have some antagonism and I got all these other issues. Well, that's where the Fusilade might stand out a little bit
Let's
better.
talk about those tough conditions. You need to use an oil, like a crop oil or an MSO, and you also need to use some nitrogen. So you need either ammonium sulfate or liquid 28%, something like that. If you've got an oil and you've got a nitrogen source, that's going to improve the performance of all of those products quite a bit.
Yep, and don't worry so much about, oh, a little Roundup burn. Yeah, you might, let's say you have oil together with your grass killer together with Roundup. It's not a big deal. I know Monsanto says, oh, we want you to use an ionic surfactant. Well, that's fine for crop response, but all you're going to do is speckle the leaves a little bit with that oil in there in terms of crop response. The other side is you are going to get a lot better volunteer corn control with the oil.
All right, let's talk about Liberty real quick. Either it's Liberty Link corn, Liberty Link soybeans. Don't count on them to control volunteer Roundup Ready corn because much of that corn is now stacked with Liberty and Roundup.
And the fact that Liberty just burns a lot of things to the ground and doesn't kill the roots tremendously well. So yeah, Liberty's not the very best volunteer corn killer. Well, that's it for our Weed of the Week, but stay tuned. Iron Talk is coming up next.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
The AFS Connect Farm Management System from Case IH connects you, and only you, to the information you need most from your equipment, from anywhere, at any time. AFS Connect, only from Case IH.
This time of year, drift is a huge concern when you're spraying. We'll talk about ways to protect yourself and your neighbors in today's Iron Talk. When it comes to drift, there are several factors that lead to more potential for physical drift of your spray particles. Wind is the one that most people focus on, but other than not spraying on windy days, we really can't control that. Knowing that almost every day has some degree of wind, maybe it's 3 or 5 miles per hour, we need to manage it. First of all, your spray nozzles make a huge difference, but your choice is either to get great coverage with finer droplets from something like a flat fan tip, or to get great drift control from a tip that makes coarser and larger droplets. Then you look at where those tips are in relation to the crop. The height of your spray boom makes a huge difference. If your boom is 3 or 4 feet above the crop, you're much more prone to drift. The best recommendation, depending on your tips and spacings, is to have the boom 20 inches above the crop. You still get your full spray pattern, and you're the least exposed to wind. This, of course, all goes out the window if you have very hilly ground. That can be a real challenge. The speed that you're running through the field is also another important factor. The newer self-propelled sprayers with auto steer make running faster that much easier, and if you have lots of acres to cover, I see the temptation of increasing your speed. The guideline here is to never run over 15 miles per hour, and if you could go slower than that, it would be even better. Finally, maintain a safe buffer around sensitive crops. Sure, you need to spray up to the edge of the field eventually, but watch all these factors and minimize your potential for problems. Play it extra safe on field borders with wind, spray tips, boom height, and sprayer operation speed management. Follow these tips and spray drift can be minimized on your farm. That's all for today's Iron Talk, and now back to the show.
Could I boost my potential by foliar feeding?
You can. Foliar feeding can correct nutrient deficiencies and sustain your crop through stress. It's a great way to deliver nutrients that your crop lacks to reach its full potential. Research proves it. Applied alone or in combination with your crop protection program, AgroLiquid products assure that when the season presents opportunity, you can boost your crop's yield potential by foliar feeding. For more info, visit agroliquid.com.
A farmer's attention to detail is what makes the difference. You take the time for service management because you know how vital it is to your operation. You service your field like everything else because soil sampling makes all the difference and gets the results you want. Download the app Soil Test Pro and start grid sampling today. Keep your farm growing strong. The more you test, the more you know.
Being a farmer means securing your land and livelihood for the future. Harvest Solutions from Capello USA have the grit to get you there. Our product lines for corn, sunflowers, and forage are designed for efficiency and longevity, preventing harvest loss while minimizing maintenance and downtime. To do everything you can to advance your farmland to the next generation, call us at 855-CAPELLO or visit us at capellousa.com. Capello USA, Italian craftsmanship, American grit.
I've been involved in developing new technologies in agriculture for over 3 decades. The changing times demanded that we develop new and better equipment. Dry powder applications on seed can only be highly successful if they can be easily, effectively, and accurately applied to the target. That's where our company, Changing Times and CT Applicators, come into the picture. The innovative CT applicators are designed to give you the most accurate application of products such as talc, soybean inoculants, or other dry products. Remember, CT Applicators for the changing times.
Looking to maximize yield? Quick Roots from Monsanto Bioag is a microbial seed inoculant that allows the plant root to explore a greater volume of soil, the key to higher yields. Quick Roots continues to generate yield response on corn, soybeans, wheat, and more, and is applied to the seed so the live microorganisms go right to work enhancing seedling vigor, increasing the uptake of certain nutrients including NPK, and expanding root volume. Maximize yield on your farm this season. Get Quick Roots today.
With the success of the Case IH Tiger Quad Track and Magnum Road Track tractors, it's no secret why Case IH is the leader of the track. So it wasn't surprising when the competition started imitating us. But only Case IH offers a 5-axle design to give you a smoother ride, more power to the ground, with less berming and compaction. Still, we're flattered. In fact, if we weren't already red, we'd be blushing.
Closed captioning for Ag PhD is sponsored by Norwood Sales.
On your farm, you need speed and year-round effectiveness in your tillage program. The Quick Till from Norwood Sales allows you to move quickly through your fields, maximizing time and improving yield. Constructed of heavy-duty materials, the Quick Till is ideal for both spring and fall applications, from preparing a healthy seedbed early in the season to breaking up corn residue after harvest. For more information about how a Quick Till can improve fields on your farm, call Norwood Sales today.
That's all the time we have for today's show, but we invite you to tune in this week to SiriusXM Channel 80 for the Ag PhD radio show at 2 p.m. Central each weekday.
And don't miss the next Ag PhD TV show, where we'll have another Weed of the Week, Farm Basics, Iron Talk, and a whole lot more. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.
There are as many living things in a handful of soil as there are people on planet Earth. But what do they do, and how do farmers work with them to raise successful crops? To learn more, visit rnmf.org.